We often talk about progress and transformation, but what happens when the work is finally done? What does that ultimate endpoint look like? A state of being that's so stable, so integrated, it's just incorruptible. That's really the question at the heart of today's deep dive. We're exploring the capstone of the great work, the magnum opus, the final alchemical operation, coagulation. And we're definitely moving beyond just base metals here. We want to understand how this process describes spiritual, psychological, and esoteric perfection. Our mission today is pretty focused. We're using a single but incredibly dense source. It's a commentary on some core esoteric text to really unpack what coagulatio means, especially in Jungian thought and in craft masonry. We want to show that the famous philosopher's stone isn't some, magical rock you just find somewhere. It's a state of consciousness you actually become.
Right. So to start with a definition, coagulation, or coagulatio, is really the grand finale. Alchemically speaking, all the previous steps, dissolution, separation, purification, all that, they all lead right here. It's this mystical fusion, you could say, of spirit and body. They merge into a permanently unified, stable substance, something incorruptible. Remember how in the earlier stages the substance was made volatile, it vaporized, it ascended, it got purified up there?
Yes, the upward movement.
Exactly. In coagulation, that purified essence, it descends again, it comes back down and becomes permanently fixed, anchored. It's the moment the invisible is made manifest, you could say, producing the incorruptible red stone, or the elixir of life, or sometimes it's called the body of light. It represents permanence, manifestation achieved.
That idea of fixed manifestation, I think that's key.
Yeah.
Because when we hear philosopher's stone, honestly, most people still jump to literal gold. Medieval guys trying to get rich.
The classic image.
But our source really insists the true stone is spiritual gold. It's the perfected, immortal self, permanently fixed in virtue.
It's the ultimate prize, really. And the symbols used to describe this perfected self, they really reflect that depth. It's called lapis philosophorum, the stone of the wise, and it's often described as a perfect cube, or maybe a radiant diamond. The shape itself suggests stability, doesn't it? Precision, light. But what I find really profound in our source is the emphasis on the end of all internal conflict, like total inner peace.
How is that symbolized?
Well, sometimes as a radiant child, or the divine androgyne. That represents the perfect balance, you see. Masculine and feminine principles totally harmonized. And maybe the most evocative image, the source actually calls the stone itself a temple without sound of tools.
Wow, a temple without sound of tools. That's a powerful piece of imagery. What does that silence imply? If there were no hammers, no chisels, where did the building happen?
That silence, that's the clue, isn't it? It points directly to the spiritual nature of the work. It implies the entire great work, all the burning, the dissolving, the purifying, it was all completed inside, within the consciousness of the individual. So the master mason, for instance, isn't actually building a physical structure with stones and mortar. He's transforming himself into a structure aligned with the great architect's blueprint. The work is purely internal, non-physical. It requires this profound inner stillness.
Okay, so if the goal is this internal perfected stability, then there's a really strong bridge here to psychology.
Right.
This sounds almost exactly like what Carl Jung spent his life exploring.
It really does.
That fixed, stable stone.
Yeah.
It must map pretty directly onto his whole process of psychological integration.
Absolutely. From an analytical psychology standpoint, coagulation is the archetype of individuation. That was Jung's term for the process, where the individual becomes a psychological, indivisible unity, a whole complete being. We start life identifying with our masks or personas. They're needed for social life, sure, but they aren't the real us. And we also push down the shadow, the parts of ourselves we don't like or don't want to admit to. Individuation means bringing all that together. Ego, the shadow, the inner opposites, anima or animus, and integrating them around a unified center. Jung called that center the self.
It's a self.
The stone is that self, but made conscious, made permanent.
So if the alchemist or the individual is successful, they stop identifying with a mask.
Yeah.
But how? How does the source tell the difference between someone who's truly integrated and someone who just thinks they are? Someone who's maybe just built a really, really convincing, stable ego mask.
That's a really critical question because integration isn't just knowing about it intellectually. Jung suggested that when coagulation, this inner fixing, is achieved, the person starts living from this unshakable inner truth.
An inner truth.
Yeah, and this truth generates psychic energy spontaneously, makes the person sort of transparent to themselves. Their motives become clear, their actions become profoundly authentic. The difference is shifting from acting out a role to simply being the perfected structure itself.
Okay, I see. The moment that perfected integrated self emerges, the psychological process then flows right into that architectural metaphor we mentioned. If the inner self is truly built, how does that show up in practice? This must be where the Masonic archetype of the master builder really comes alive.
Exactly right. For a Freemason, that fixed state of coagulation is the true embodiment of the Master Mason ideal. And the whole journey is often visualized through the metaphor of the ashlar, the building stone.
The rough and the smooth ashlar.
Precisely. The initiate starts as the rough ashlar, raw potential but unformed, covered in imperfections, vices. The work of the degrees, the various stages, is about chipping away those falsehoods. Coagulation is the moment the perfect ashlar emerges. The stone that's been perfectly squared, polished by discipline, aligned with the moral square, it becomes a living stone, radiating its own inner light.
So it's not just about following rules externally, it's about actually becoming a source of that light yourself. That connects directly to that Albert Pike quote in our source material, doesn't it?
It does. Pike really emphasizes that. He says the perfect stone is the man who, having been shaped by virtue, shines with the radiance of divine purpose. See, the perfection isn't static, it's active, it's luminous.
And what's really interesting here is how the goal immediately seems to expand beyond just the individual. The perfect ashlar isn't meant to just sit there alone looking perfect. Our source makes a point that this individual achievement feeds into something bigger, something communal.
Yes, absolutely. The stone is the individual goal achieved, yes, but the larger vision is collective. Each perfected soul becomes a living stone used to build this mystical celestial temple.
Like a spiritual house, as some scriptures put it.
Exactly that phrase, a spiritual house built of living stones. So the personal act of coagulation contributes to the renewal and perfection of humanity as a whole. It provides the building blocks, you could say, for a renewed world.
Okay, let's dig into the actual architectural symbols that represent this completion. Our source points to two key symbols for coagulation that seem almost contradictory at first glance, but are actually deeply connected: the cornerstone and the capstone. How can the perfected self be both the foundation and the summit?
It's a brilliant paradox, isn't it? It perfectly captures the completeness of the stone. Think about the cornerstone. It's laid first. It has to be perfectly squared, perfectly aligned, because it determines the stability and dimensions of the entire building.
Sets the standard.
Right. Esoterically, the cornerstone represents that divine spark, the original blueprint within the self. It needs to be aligned and anchored right from the start of the journey. It's the unshakable truth everything else is built upon.
Okay, that's the foundation. And then you have the capstone, the final piece placed.
Exactly, the capstone, or sometimes the keystone. It's the summit. It completes the arch or finishes the pyramid. It's often symbolized in mystery traditions, by the all-seeing eye hovering over the unfinished pyramid.
Right, I've seen that imagery.
It signifies the final union of matter and spirit, right at the highest point of achievement. It represents potential fully realized. And you hear this echo in that phrase, the stone the builders rejected now become the head of the corner. The synthesis is that the successful initiate through coagulation becomes the entire temple. They embody both the aligned foundation, the cornerstone, and the completed summit, the capstone. They become a living, breathing, microcosmic temple, fully embodying the great architect's design.
Wow. So once that inner temple is complete spirit and matter fixed together,
Yeah.
that brings us to the culmination of the alchemical marriage, right? The union of the Red King and the White Queen.
Yes.
But in this final stage, coagulation, the source says the Red King stands alone, crowned with gold. This must represent what it calls the sovereignty within.
Precisely. Sovereignty within means complete mastery over one's own inner world, your inner forces. The individual is no longer tossed around by external events or emotional storms or, base desires.
You're in charge of yourself.
Completely. It's the permeant stabilization of the philosopher's stone within the soul. It's like the sun finally fixed in its glory, shining steadily from inside the temple. And the source connects this fixed, sovereign state to the highest spiritual parallel imaginable. the concept of the resurrection body.
The resurrection body, like in Christian theology.
Exactly. St. Paul described it in 1 Corinthians 15, a luminous, incorruptible, immortal, spiritual body of glory. Coagulation is basically the alchemical version of transfiguration. The material vehicle isn't discarded, it's perfected, it's made permanent and luminous.
That is a profound claim, that the transformation achieved in this life leads to an actual incorruptible state. And this state seems to go beyond physical place entirely, shifting the focus from where you are to who you are.
Absolutely. When we talk about something like the Celestial Lodge in Masonic terms, Pike is very clear. He asserts it is not a place in the stars, but a state of being. Coagulation is the entry into that state. It's about fully realizing the light within yourself, and then that light permeates everything you do, every decision you make.
Which brings us, I think, to the final, maybe the most potent symbol of this completion, the restoration of the true word.
Yeah.
In so many traditions, the word is this lost secret you have to find externally. But here, after coagulation, it sounds like it's realized internally.
Yes. The true word isn't some lost syllable you have to whisper correctly. It is the complete state of being that's achieved through the great work. Our source links this directly to the full manifestation of the Kabbalistic tetragrammaton, YHVH, the four-letter name, that, in a way, defines existence itself.
Yod-He-Vav-He.
Right. That name is often associated with the four worlds of creation, the whole progression of manifestation from spirit to matter. When the initiate achieves coagulation, they essentially become the living embodiment of that divine word, the Logos incarnate. It means the perfected human being has aligned themselves so completely with the divine blueprint that their very existence speaks the truth. The temple is finished, the light is fixed inside, and the word resonates silently, powerfully within the perfected heart.
So, bringing this all together, what's the ultimate takeaway for us, for you listening? It seems coagulation is a great work finally fulfilled. It's the beginning of conscious embodiment. The stone isn't found under a rock. It's forged through intense, disciplined internal effort. The true master, then, the one who has reached this fixed state, our source describes them as someone who remains raised, someone who walks through the world as a conscious builder of harmony. The conclusion it offers is quite beautiful. His temple is himself, his altar is his heart, his square is his conscience, and his compass is his compassion.
Yeah, to become the stone is really to move beyond all the shifting, volatile parts of the ego, the errors, the confusion. It's becoming, you could say, immortal in purpose, radiant in your humility and eternal in your actions. It's what you are when all the illusion, all the base stuff, all the external masks have finally successfully been burned away and fixed into something pure and stable.
We've talked about this transformation largely as this interior process, right? Integration, the self-contained, silent temple. But if the stone is genuinely this perfected essence meant to radiate light, meant to be a living stone, contributing to that celestial temple, then maybe this transformation can't be purely solitary. So here's the thought to leave you with. If you personally were to achieve this level of coagulated strength, this inner sovereignty, what specific actions or daily choices in your life would actually prove that this perfected essence is meant to be actively shared? How would you show it's not just something hidden and admired, but something given? That's the challenge to ponder.